this and said, yeah, only was going to do this, so I got Bruce's okay, because I didn't want to make this as kind of a point of personal privilege, but I thought it would be important to kind of do a presentation about the role of Rotary and the UN celebrating their 75th anniversary Saturday. And so this has been a year, unfortunately marked by COVID, where they haven't been able to celebrate it the way that they want to. But I thought it'd be a great story to tell about, how we got to this level of a partnership that's 75 years in the making. So Rotary and the UN, a 75-year partnership. So just a little background, and I'm not getting into the sort of, American internal politics of it. I mean, there's issues there that we have to confront. The issues of reform are very important, but kind of telling the story of how we came to be is going to be the emphasis of this presentation. So the United Nations, marching towards this idea of a new world order, started as early as 1942. And this is during the war. But even while we were fighting World War II, the Allies were interested in this idea of a new world order. And so this UN declaration at the Atlantic Conference in January, New Year's Day of 42, this is the first time a term called the United Nations was used. So this, we had never heard of such a thing. The world was governed and guided by their own nation state and their own interests and their own agendas. And so this idea of having a united international order was new up until then. And so this became a part of the discussion. And so while we're fighting World War II, there are being discussions, as I said, the Allies, of how does this new world order going to look? So there's a series of conferences, and one was called the Moscow Conference. That included the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States. And they were calling for a creation of an organization for peace and security. And so even though sometimes you hope to not have 4 meetings instead of 1, I think it was important that each of these steps were getting closer and closer to this idea of an international organization. So Moscow says, hey, we need an organization for peace and security. And so they had a conference the next year in Dumbarton Oaks, which is a state in Washington, D.C., and they bring China on board. And they say, okay, we need a structure devoted towards peace, security, and cooperation, and economic and social cooperation. Okay. Then they get to Yalta, and Yalta is a little bit of both. Yalta's towards the end of the war, so Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt were there to discuss not only sort of what the end of the war is going to look like, but they made a commitment to a leadership role in this new United Nations organization, and then they committed to being leaders at this new conference in October in San Francisco towards putting together a new international organization. So it's kind of like making commitments, and probably even though, it's sort of making a commitment here, we say we want an organization, okay, then it's going to look like this, and then we're going to commit to leading an organization, a conference, to putting together a treaty known as the UN Charter in San Francisco. So San Francisco, which was signed 75 years ago Saturday, is the UN Charter that put together the United Nations. And they created that based upon these objectives of peace and collective security that they all agreed upon. So a lot of this was very, very important because Rotary was really much helping to push this agenda, these messages that were coming out of these conferences. They wanted Rotarians, through the Rotarian magazine, to understand the deliberations and discussions that were happening at this level towards creating this permanent organization. And this helped Rotary helped America overcome the isolationist sentiment that, as you recall from your history, we kind of at the end of World War I, we were isolated in the 20s and 30s, and we didn't want to get into the skirmishes as Hitler was taking over invading Europe until Pearl Harbor and many other sort of events. But what was important is, in the big picture 75 years later, the United Nations would not have been possible without the full support of the UN. That's why the League of Nations failed. The League of Nations failed because we didn't ratify the Treaty of Versailles. Even though we were there negotiating the peace after World War I, we didn't support it. And so we were not, and then this trick, we did not ratify the UN Treaty, the UN Charter. We would not have, the UN would not exist. But this was kind of looking, and so there, you can't see this, but this is some propaganda that came out What can Rotarians do following Dumbarton Oaks? So that conference I mentioned that talked about peace and security. And so they were giving these things to Rotarians, saying, here, this is what you can do as Rotarians. Go and read what's going on. Talk to your club. What does peace mean? What does peace mean to you as Rotarians and to a New World Order? What is this idea of cooperating economically and socially? This idea of collective security. It was kind of neat, just empowering Rotarians themselves to better educate themselves on all this is going on. I emphasize it because that's amazing. Here we are. I don't know how many clubs there were in 1944-45, but we are 31 of 35,000 clubs in the world. And to empower the club at the localist of levels to understand what's going on at this highest level of negotiation among international diplomats is very thing. They say in there's this other pamphlet called From Here On. This is what they wanted folks to do. So this was given by our Rotary International. From here on, this is what we should do. And there was a quote that came from one of this. He said, the Rotary publication said, it is a splendid opportunity for the individual Rotarian to fulfill the objective of international service by taking part in the debate on this scheme of world government. Now, the UN isn't exactly world government, as the charter kind of conference came about. They didn't create a true world government, but this notion of being a part of these discussions and being connected to it is what Rotary is all about, and in many ways what the UN was ostensibly all about. So this UN Conference on International Organization happened in San Francisco in the spring, even though they waited, the signatures were in the fall because of going back to your governments, but this is where it all came together. And Rotary was one of the 42 organizations invited by the Department of State, the State Department, to serve as consultants to the American delegation. So they asked all these other NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Of the 51 delegates that were there, of delegations of 800 delegates, 49 of them were active Rotarians. So they understood Rotary. They understood the four-way test. They understood Rotary and peace and understanding. And so these principles that they understood as Rotary, and Rotary had been around at that point almost 40 years, was going to be embedded into the fabric and DNA of the new charter that would become the United Nations. And so the task in San Francisco was to write and finalize these charters. Just like you did at Versailles, these things took months. And so the conferences leading up to it prepared for a lot of the framework. So the goal was, coming out of this, we seek this. And they had the preamble, we the peoples of the United Nations determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to reaffirm our faith in human rights and the dignity of the human person and equal rights, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligation arising from international law can be retained, and to promote social progress and freedom. And so this is the United Nations flag that was established as a part of the symbol of the San Francisco Conference in the beginning of this United Nations. And so this was kind of the other propaganda I've put of, okay, out of the San Francisco Conference, how do we use the message coming out of here in planning Rotary programs? How do we become better Rotarians by understanding the message coming out of the UN through the themes of peace, collective security, and human rights? That how can we promote peace and a perfect partnership? What better organization that promotes peace than Rotary? And goodwill and better understanding among peoples around the world. So the guiding principles are these. It's this idea of sovereignty. So sometimes people get frustrated, and I didn't want to get too political about this, but one thing that does frustrate people about the UN is, why isn't it doing enough? Why isn't it doing what it says it could do? But the fundamental aspect of a New World Order and the United Nations was this idea of the principle of sovereignty. Sovereignty of nations, their self-governance, their ability to self-govern is supreme. You cannot violate somebody's ability to self-govern, nor can you violate their ability to rule their affairs. So you can't invade people's countries. The principle of sovereignty. You can't compel a nation to do certain things it can't do unless through their various means. So principal sovereignty is very much a center of this entire movement. It must be respected, and it's recognized by the Charter to deal with the human rights question, a security question, a peacekeeping question. And so the UN is committed to it hardcore. That's why the UN took positions like it did with the Iraq War, the United States, and others. It doesn't matter what your position is. You invade another country, that country has the same rights to sovereignty as you do. And so UN's been very firm about that, regardless of what some people might not like. Peacekeeping, the idea of peace, dealing with conflicts. There's been a lot of peacekeeping efforts. So this notion of what can the world do to maintain peace and order throughout the world. It doesn't have an army. I know there's men in blue hats, but they're not a full armed forces, and that wasn't the intention, because then you bring some sort of elements like a world government, which the UN doesn't want to do. Yes, some do carry weapons, but they're only allowed to fight back when attacked. But the peacekeepers are usually sent to areas to observe a ceasefire, to negotiate a peace. So this idea of collective security is, how do you stop the spread of terrorism, weapons of mass destruction? The disarmament of nuclear weapons is a big part of this idea of collective security. How can we all be secure in terms of maintaining our order and our sovereignty? And a fourth principle is human rights. So this idea, even though the human rights was emphasized in the Charter, 3 years ago they put together what was called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this was in '48. And this is always something when I work with the United Nations Association we commemorate. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So it's not a treaty per se, where it didn't have to have a 2/3 vote of the Senate like the UN Charter or like the League of Nations or something. It certainly has a huge sort of force. So what is the UN? I'll go through some of this. You've got major institutions of the UN: the Secretariat, the Security Council, General Assembly, and then various bodies of international justice. And so the Secretariat is pretty much right here. This is in this building here. And they're led by what's called a Secretary General. The Secretary General oversees the United Nations. It's always an evolving job description. In many ways, it's an impossible job description. You think being President of the United States or being head of state is, Secretary General has to be a diplomat, always on its toes, always kind of working with every kind of stuff. If they're not dealing with nation states, they're dealing with their international organizations like ours. 9,000 people work in places like New York. This is at the UN headquarters. Geneva, Vienna, other parts of the world. Nairobi, Kenya has in the UN offices. The current Secretary General is a guy named Antonio Guterres from Portugal. I don't know if he's a Rotarian or not. I don't know what the last couple Secretaries General have been. The other one is, and you've heard more probably about this, is the Security Council. And the Security Council, this is probably the organ that has the most teeth. This is going to be, there are 5 permanent members, and that's going to be the United States, Great Britain, the Russian Federation, France, and China. And those are the victors of World War II. So yeah, that sometimes can become a little contentious. Okay, why them? Well, why not these other states? Well, you're fighting a war. Germany was on the enemy side. They're not going to be a part of putting together this world order. They were defeated. But these 5 have been there, and of course, Russia was an ally. And then China had its alliance during the World War as well. There's 15 members of the Security Council. So they have the 5 permanent members. They have these 10 elected members that rotate. Belgium, Dominican Republic, Estonia, Germany, Indonesia, Niger, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, South Africa, Tunisia, and Vietnam. And so they rotate. So every country, every member nation, and there's 193 in the UN, have a significant role, and they get to serve on the Security Council on a rotating basis. But it's those 5, US, China, France, Russia, Great Britain, that have that permanent status. But it's the only body of all the UN that makes decisions that everybody has to abide by. And it's the only body that can authorize the use of force. So that's why it's important for a nation, let's say the United States wanted to go to war, to get a Security Council resolution adds a lot of weight, because they can authorize the use of force or allow a member state to use force. But then what makes it difficult is every one of the great powers has what they call veto power. So they can veto any decision. And it's been contentious lately, because if the United States wants to do something, who's vetoed a lot of their decisions? China. China has a lot of interest at stake, and their interests are separate from the United States. Darfur, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a lot of the genocide that was going on in Sudan and in Africa about 10, 15 years ago. The UN did little to do about it, and that baffled people. Why? It's because when there were resolutions coming before the Security Council, China vetoed them. Why did China veto them? They have business interests in Sudan. And so they were a little cozier to the regime that was killing all these people. So, that's back to the sovereignty of states and back to this structure, which is imperfect, and that's where but this is the enforcing mechanism. General Assembly, that's where places, people think Capitol Hill is hot air. This is where a lot of people can air grievances. They can present. Usually every September, they have the General Assembly meets, and every foreign head of state who's a member of the UN comes to speak. So Donald Trump can speak, although they did a lot of it on Twitter. They can debate things. This is where they approve the budget. This is where they approve a lot of things. They can have resolutions where, just like you see a tote board of members of Congress, it's a tote board of nations. So there is some decision-making power that the General Assembly has, but not that way. It can only make recommendations. This doesn't have that full weight of a government. Because, I think when it came to this idea of a world government, I think the powers, like, we can't get there because of this idea of sovereignty of nations, and nation states are supreme. And we still carry that to this day. There are these two other outfits called the International Court of Justice. This was, they can hear disputes among states. And this is in The Hague. And then there's this outfit called the International Criminal Court, also in The Hague. And this court deals with issues of crimes associated with war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. So a more specific mandate than the International Court of Justice, which is disputes among states. This is set up as a court where if all matters that are dealt with these sorts of issues can first be dealt with by national judicial courts. So it comes to the ICC if a country cannot act in good faith to prosecute a criminal of these particular crimes. So who was a little concerned about the ICC formation? The United States, of course. The United States was afraid that this is going to be this world court that would undermine us. No. The United States helped frame the statute called the Rome Statute to put this court together to protect these nations like the U.S. and others against this intrusion. The only time that the ICC comes into effect is if the country's national courts don't act in good faith. We will always act in good faith. If one of our national citizens commits genocide, we will try them through our courts. It's only when we didn't want to, it would go before here. And I think we would prevent anything from coming here. It's those rogue African nations who sort of don't want to do anything, who are very corrupt, where you see a lot of these trials take place. So it balances kind of that sovereignty, balances American interest, balances Western interest with trying to get, folks that truly commit. So they've had some trials of Sierra Leone killings, mass genocides, Liberia, the dictator Charles Taylor there was tried for some stuff. So they've had some very successful trials in the 20 years they've been on. And they have this other group called the Economic Social Council that coordinates a lot of socioeconomic activities and deals with women's issues, human rights, specialized U.S. institutions as well. A big part of what comes together with a lot of this is this UN Day, Rotary Day at the UN. So every Rotarian from around the world, all 1.2 million of us, are invited to come to Rotary Day. This is Martin Maloney a few years ago, or the president, and they invite everybody to come. They gives tours of the campus of the UN ground. don't know if anyone's been to the UN. I've been a couple times. It's a neat experience just to see where everything happens. It's very secure, but it's a good place. It's right on the East River in New York. And so everybody from Rotary leaders, club members, leaders of the United Nations, the Secretary General, the RI President, all come together. And lately they've been giving awards called People in Action Awards. That's one of the fundamental themes of Rotary. And so people can nominate it and they give these awards. Now, they didn't have one this year, which is sad. I don't think they're going to have a Rotary Day at the UN. But I looked online, they're going to have a Rotary Day at the World Health Organization next February. So they're going to give these People of Action Awards for people who are working in the healthcare field. So the World Health Organization, a very important role. So I was going to do this for the benefit of our students that came here, but sometimes I give this presentation. When I see this, like when you see these images, what do you think of? You think of weather, you think of storms, right? You think of, oops. You see tornadoes, you see wind, you see snow, you see fire, you see all sorts of weather issues. You see tornadoes, you see all this, but when I see that, when I see weather forecasts, I think of the UN. The work of the World Meteorological Organization is involved in helping countries and nations deal with better understandings of weather issues and weather research. So think of the UN that way. If I see some food here, what do you think? Good food, right? I think of the UN and the work of the Food and Agricultural Organization. That sets standards and works with local government and national governments on proper ways to help oversee safe and effective food policy. When I see the child here who is sick and dying, I think of the work of the World Health Organization that works every day with governments, with non-government organizations to provide medicine, to provide appropriate care for those that are hungered, malnourished, and in poverty. I will look at this water tap, and I mean, even me, I'll look at this and think of the UN and the World Health Organization in dealing with fresh water issues. Heck, when I look at a burger or bacon, I still think of the UN and the World Health Organization's involvement in dealing with appropriate food safety. So everything you see around you, when you go into your shower and you take a shower, think of the UN. When you have a burger, think of the UN. When you have a hot dog, think of the UN. Halloween's coming up. Boy, what do you think of Halloween? I certainly think of the UN and the important work of UNICEF and Trick or Treat for UNICEF. When it comes to a marketing standpoint, this may be one of the most recognizable brands of the UN in the general public. Everybody knows about Trick or Treat for UNICEF, the United Nations International Children's Fund. Maybe some of your grandkids and some of you have had those little boxes that you can raise money for these efforts. And so UNICEF is a very popular, very, very prominent organization in the UN. And a lot of these prominent organizations. So when I go and we might have a box with my kids that donate for UNICEF. When I think of classrooms, think of the UN and the work of the United Nations Educational, Social, and Cultural Organization. A very important one, but in many ways it's been a political football for the United States. Hey, they're going to promote a liberal leftist agenda. But no, it's about promoting best practices for education, social, cultural awareness. So we've been in and out of that organization for a while. We're back in now. The earth, when I think of the earth, when I think of forests, when I think of landscape, when I think of the open environment, I think of the UN. I think of the work of the United Nations Environment Program and the work that they're doing to ensuring that our environment must be protected and maintained for us and for our future generations. And when I think of the important work that's going on with polio, perhaps the most successful program Rotary has done, I think of the United Nations. And I think of the partnership that Rotary has had with the UN in getting this close to ending polio. We have committed $1.2 billion as Rotary towards eliminating, and a lot of the other funds have been leveraged through World Health Organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and all of these. So when I think about a lot of these things, so just, if you think about the things that you do in your daily life, the UN has a role in it, and it's, whether you're trick-or-treating, whether you're eating a hot dog, or taking a bath, taking a drink of water, when you go to school, when you go to the grocery store, what's it going to be? The future of the UN, what's it going to be in the next 75 years? I think Rotarians' involvement in it and this continued understanding of peace and global understanding will only enhance the UN's work. That it's important to understand that the work we do as Rotarians is much of the same work that's done by not only the United Nations and its principal groups, but all these other affiliated specialized organizations that I highlighted that are carrying out this mission that they've done for 75 years and hopefully for 75 more years to come. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Any idea how many Rotarians serve in the UN now?
Good question. I do not know.
Obviously not enough.
Obviously not enough. That's a good question. But it would be important to work to know. But it's so I'll look that up. Yeah.
Rotary has several universities that are that train graduate students in world peace and
That's right.
in developing programs and developing better ways to encourage peace around the world.
I would like to, this is sort of a little goal, that I'd like to, I've talked to you, Bruce, this year and even a little bit of next year, my year, is to try to get us positioned to sponsor people for those, not only global scholarship, but this peace fellowship. So what it is every Rotary has these peace centers, and they have two in the United States, I think in Berkeley in North Carolina, and then there's one in Francis National University, one in Japan, and one in England, a few others. And Rotary gives them a full scholarship to study peace and conflict resolution. So some of it has some UN affiliation, but Rotary, it's a huge kind of thing. Actually, one of the very first era of these scholarships, a friend of mine in Louisville got one. He studied at the International Christian University in Tokyo and got a master's degree in peace and conflict resolution, sponsored by Rotary. So I'd love to do that because I think that would help the district. The district has only positioned itself for the global scholarships, but it's never ever applied. So, getting a student, yes, little I could do to identify who I know at USI, but I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a great, it's a good feather in Rotary's cap that a lot of people don't know about.
Who's going to be district governor for your year?
Kirk Bucci
From Vincent?
from Vincent, yeah. So
Put that bug in his ear.
I'll put a bug in his ear because these big time things are good for districts. And so Jim Bright's helped a lot with the global grants, global scholarship. I think we got momentum. Whether it's coming, I'm hoping to get somebody to apply for that in Evansville and USI, so it's not just IU.
Any idea what the cost of it would be?
For the global scholarship,
Yeah.
oh, it's usually $40,000.
It's pretty big.
Yeah. For this one would be for the peace one.
Yeah.
Would be, it's full cost as well.
Yeah.
It's 2 years, whereas the global scholarship's just
What, do all the clubs donate money to that?
No, I think it's foundation. It's the International Foundation, so it's
District match part of it, or?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it is an RI deal, Rotary Foundation.
We just put somebody forward.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
I've never had the impression when it used to be called ambassadorial that the district had any that's just the beauty of what the foundation could do. One thing that we used to do, and you guys might have been aware of it, was the GSE, Global Group Study Exchange, and that was an international foundation thing where
It was for undergraduates and high school students.
no, the GSE was more young professionals.
We had the 5 people.
Oh,
Yeah,
They were young professionals. They were working people, and so they phased that out, but for a few years, they let districts fund them. And so Tim Lee, I don't know if that name rings a bell, he was district governor 3, 4, 5 years ago. Tim helped Like he was gung ho about it, but it's a shame that RI as a movement has stepped away from that exchange because folks like us, I mean, young, you'd be, if you weren't a Rotarian, you'd be in that demographic of, but then Rotarians can lead
That was
delegations.
a great thing.
Yeah.
We always had, Brazil, England, Japan, gosh, we had,
Germany?
and we always took a big part, we took one of the most active parts of
Oh, yeah.
this,
We could pick them up and take them to
we had for
the
3 to
get
4
them up
days. Oh, yeah.
And so I'd love to get back into some of that, whether it's, but I appreciate Dave and Jim sharing. But yeah, about the Peace Scholarship, that is a center. What were you saying? What is the UN? What was its role? Creating a peaceful world order after the scourge of World War II. What does Rotary do? Peace and goodwill and global
You know
understanding.
what I had if there was a visitor center to you, and I had been by that 3 or 4 times and I've never stopped, but
Yeah, there is. There's a gift shop, there's a visitor center, and then there's tours.
okay, I didn't.
Yeah.
I never
I mean,
stopped.
security's a little weird, probably.
Yeah. Well, that's why I probably never stopped, because boy, you walk out of the gates, you can.
It's that, what's interesting is McLeod talked about brutalist architecture, he talked about our civic center. UN's like that too. If you like that brutal, it's kind of one of the best out there, but it's kind of it's not the cozy inviting, and I think there's barricades in places where they haven't been, so it's kind of, that kind of brutalist modern, we all drank that, but we all bought in that. But anyway, thanks for any questions, others? Yeah, the Peace Scholarships are great. My friend Daniel, if he was ever stateside, I'd bring him here to talk about it. It was just a great. So what my friend Daniel with that scholarship did, he ended up doing a program called the JET program, Japanese Exchange and Teaching. So he stayed in Japan, taught English as a second language, met his wife there, but he became a foreign service officer
Well,
with the State Department.
we use the term peace through understanding, and then, but how do you create understanding? How do you do those kinds of things?
You educate.
And that's what that university
Right.
is all about. And it's for graduate level students. They've already had to be.
That's right, they're all graduate
They
students.
already have to have good backgrounds and.
So yeah, you're going to get a good student
And they
out there.
send good, smart students, people that are creative and have a heart for that.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, that might be good to talk to our district governor to see if there's even if it's somebody who, whoever, but yeah, well, hopefully, I'm trying to get a little bug in the ear of the international office at USI about the global scholarship. See if someone would go on and apply at the end of the year.
You got any possible out there? Or?
No, I'm thinking, as students come my way and I have them, it's not for everybody. You just have to identify the right person. I have a really bright, motivated student in one of mine, but she's all about local campaigns. So, but it's somebody who wants to live and work internationally and serve, so it's got to be the right, like for instance, Alex Starry, and then that other one that was recommended to us. Those are top-notch people.
Mhm.
We should be proud, and it was good to at least have her come when we did that a few months ago.
It's amazing, young people that have gotten involved in church programs where the church sends them somewhere and they work for 2 weeks in Haiti, or they work someplace in underdeveloped countries, and they
Yeah.
see how others have had to live, and then they realize quickly how lucky we are, and they start to develop a servant's heart. And it takes somebody like that then works hard in school and is bright to go to one of these universities and be dedicated to understanding and peace throughout the
Yeah.
rest of their lives.
And I think the district's got to carry a little bit of the mantle too, and I don't know if this district has done enough of those. Like, I feel like in the 6710 in Kentucky, that was more of they were moving. GSC, that mattered. There was some emphasis there.
See, well, maybe we need
We
to,
just need to
we
revive
need
it.
to do a program with some of the high schools and some of the colleges or universities that let them know about these programs that are available and that are so important. And it might just be that they've got one of those people that change the world.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, that's probably one way we can do our part as a club, yeah. I agree. District coordinates a lot of it, so their help is essential too, because, you know, it's kind of, if they don't support it, I think it gets a little difficult. But I don't think it's anything like we don't want to. If we did all the work, they'd sign it, but, you know. It's just, I don't see the platform from the last couple of district governors saying, promoting these international initiatives like maybe they used to or maybe other districts. But that's okay.
Okay. You got one of the premier universities in the country in the district.
That's right. That's what, you know, that's, you know.
There's that one up north looking to.
That's right, that one too. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it would just be spread the wealth. I don't want IU students getting it every year. I don't think that's good for the district to get into the IU every year.
It's not.
If you could mix it with Vincennes, IU, IUE,
Our global scholars, were they the IU Reds?
I think they both were, yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, you have IU Southeast. You have I don't know if Hanover is in our district. Yeah, Hanover. You have Hanover, Madison. That's in our district. That's a great school.
All righty, well, anything else?
Thank you guys. Appreciate
Yeah,
it, Bruce.
great-
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Very good.
Well, it was like, how much, $4 in kitties?
Yeah, big deal today, guys.
I'm assuming everybody bought in, so we'll just we'll let Ken draw.
Well, yeah, you drop that.
If I draw mine, I'll put it back, okay?
No,
No.
you're playing fair. Yeah, you're not looking.
Get you a cheeseburger or something.
356.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't looked at mine.
It probably is yours. Probably is yours because I bought mine after yours.
I'm 367 or something. I think I am.
Would you believe I pulled mine
Ah.
You gotta be kidding me.
You weren't looking. That's fine.
Bruce hold the cards.
Yeah, Bruce can hold the guards.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna do that.
there's $246 in the kitty.
Okay. Party again.
Looking for the 9 of spades.
All
right.
Yeah.
Have you shuffled these?
For
thoroughly?
$4.
Oh, $4 my cheeseburger.
All right, there you go.
I don't know where it is. Queen of Diamonds.
Oh.
Too bad.
Well, we know this one was legitimate.
It was legitimate, guys, believe me.
All righty.
Okay, I'll put them back in there.
All right.
Okay, remember next Thursday, don't come here because we won't be here.
We'll
That's right.
here.
Five
What time
Thanks
do we
for
gonna
holding
start?
5 o'clock,
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Where
Looks
is
fun.
this now?
300 West Jennings Street.
In
Oh,
Newburgh, downtown
Newburgh.
Newburgh.
Down by Newburgh.
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
Should be fun. You gotta be able to
Where
come.
the Tin Fish used to be,
Yeah.
that big building that has, it's all, got
What's
all kinds of things.
They got it.
Oh, it's
I'm
Toastmasters.
not sure if I'll make it.
Is it usually? Is it every other week?
I don't
Or
like.
is it usually the last?
Every Thursday.
It's everything.
And they took them the second one because officers were there. Second
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Power,
Yeah.
every
That's
time
good.
anybody brings free money.
Especially when you're an officer.
It's like here, yeah.
I wouldn't want to leave her.
No, because she's still using the walker, see.
Bye, Jim. Thank you.
Bye, Jim. All righty, anybody got any place to put up one of our last 2 flyers?
I brought a couple to Innovation Point. They're being sticklers at USI, what can be approved to be hung up or not, so.
I gave a couple to the gym, so they put them up, the 2 of them.
Okay.
I guess a
They
lot
said
of,
they did, I haven't seen them, I didn't go to the other gyms.
Huh, I haven't thought about that. I could drive out to my gym. I'm not
yeah,
allowed to work out, but I could take them out.
go for it, that'd be nice.
Yeah, they put it up in the place, cause most of those people like to have a sandwich and a drink afterwards.
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah, it's a good
It is
idea.
for a good cause. We got a lot of people from the east side.
Okay, thank
you.
I can't believe I did that,
All
guys.
righty, well, we'll rise and give a rousing rendition of the four-way test, all the five others here. Alrighty, please join me in the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First,
Is it
The truth.
second,
Is
It's fair to all concerned.
third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendship?
and fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you all for being here today.
They could,
Thanks.
they could,
Thanks for letting me do the presentation.
Oh,
They